I'm going to tell you a little bit about what her duties are. And then roaming through the room, waving over there, is Pat Corrington, also with the League, and she's going to be responsible for collecting your questions. And I'm going to give you some instructions about that as well. Also, you need to know that the forum this evening is videotaped by Yavabai Broadcasting, and it will show on Cable 1, Channel 56, Sunlink, Channel 2, and YouTube. As background information before we get started, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, and we envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate in the democracy, to vote. The purpose of the forum is to enable you to hear from your candidates, to learn why they want to serve on the city council or town council, and to pose questions to the candidates about the issues that are important to them and to you. The goal of this forum is threefold: fairness, civility, and engagement. Mary's role this evening, our timekeeper, is to do just that, keep us on time. And she has 3 signs. The first sign is a 1-minute sign. It's upside down, Mary. Okay.
Good.
The second sign.
Jerome, it's appropriate.
Okay. The second sign is 30 seconds. And the final one is stop. And these are for the candidates' use. She will raise the 1-minute sign and then the 30-second sign to let the candidates know how much time remains in their particular response time. And she will raise the stop sign to signal to the candidate, whomever is speaking, that it's time to stop and end the sentence. And if the candidate keeps going, I will help the candidate to stop and finish the sentence. So will all of you, okay. We are also going to collect written questions from you and organize them into topic areas, and then I will present them to the candidates. And Pat Corrington will be the person who will be collecting the questions. And as you have them, if you just hold them up, she'll come and get them. I would like you to use those cards while you're listening to the candidates, because you might think of a question you hadn't thought of before while you hear them speaking. The format we're going to use tonight is in 3 parts as well. The first is opening remarks from the candidates. The second part will be questions from you, the audience. And the third part is closing remarks and some final reminders. In the opening remarks, each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce him or herself to you. Then they will be presented a question from the League of Women Voters, which we sent to them in advance. Questions from you are encouraged, and we'll be collecting them as I mentioned. They will have 1 to 2 minutes to respond to your questions, depending upon the time period or the number of issues we have to cover. We may also be able to have some rebuttal time if we have sufficient time and not so many questions. We want to get to all the questions that you pose. And then finally, there'll be closing statements, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to present their final remarks. Now, the last piece of housekeeping I want to share with you are guidelines. And these are guidelines that are best practices across all the forums that we have done, and they really work well. So let me share them with you. The first one is, my job is to manage the forum fairly for all the candidates and for you. And the goal is to keep the discussion moving. So the order of speaking by the candidates has been determined in advance. And we'll start going that way with opening remarks, and then we'll rotate during the question and answer period, and then we'll do closing statements, reverse order. The candidates, the second guideline, the candidates are to be respectful of each other's points of view, speak their minds freely, and not engage in personal attacks. The candidates will not interrupt one another. They'll be really polite. I'm quite confident of that. The third rule is that the audience is asked to refrain, that's you, from applauding or in other ways demonstrating support or non-support for the candidates and their comments. And we'll keep applause to the very end in the closing statements. It'll make us use our time more effectively. The fourth rule is that time limits on responses to questions will be observed strictly. Mary's very good at that. And I have the responsibility also of enforcing the time limits. And the fifth guideline, I don't think we're going to need. However, I want to share it with you anyway. Should these guidelines be violated by the candidates and or the audience, the moderator, that's me, has the responsibility to adjourn the forum. Okay? All right, now let's get to the good stuff. The candidates each have 2 minutes to share why they are seeking election to the City Council, as well as tell us about their qualifications and skills for the position. As I mentioned, the order of speaking has already been determined, and we will begin with Jack.
Okay. Thank you very much. Rusty, thank you for the use of the firehouse. Thank you all for being here. It's a privilege for me to be here before you. For those of you who don't know, Jack Dillenberg, I'm a recovering dentist. I grew up in New York City as a kid. I've been coming to Jerome since 1985. Almost every year. I love this town. I love the heritage. I love the people that are here and what it represents. My lovely bride, Jamie, and I were married here at the Surgeon's House over 2 years ago. We had a very good fortune and never thought we could afford to live here. We were able to buy the Kennedy House over on Holly and East. And we're so thankful to be here. We love the Hogback neighborhood and folks. In a quick summary, I semi-retired, I guess, after 45 years. I've been doing public service my entire life. I've considered myself someone who promotes social mission. When I was doing dentistry, I was a Navy dentist for a couple of years. Then I worked with special needs kids and adults for a couple of years. That's the only patients I saw. And then I went to Jamaica, where I ran a dental clinic in a fishing village for the Jamaican Ministry of Health for 2.5 years, living on the beach, the only dentist for 126,000 people. I decided to steer the boat, not row the boat, went to Harvard, got my master's of public health, and wound up teaching there and working in Calcutta, India, where I would go for the World Bank twice a year for 6 years, and I set up some programs there for some of the poorest people on the planet in the busties, the slum areas. Got to meet Mother Teresa in 1980. That was really good. 30 seconds. What happened to the 1 minute? I missed that. Yeah, so anyway, here in Arizona, I had the privilege of serving as the health secretary for the state of Arizona in the cabinet of Fife-Symington, where I ran the state health department and continue to do public service ever since. California here. I'm currently the chair of a couple of not-for-profit boards. Nothing would thrill me more to be able to do what I can to help Jerome thrive, keep its heritage, and help keep people healthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack. Nicholas?
Okay. I'm terrible at public speaking, so I'm sorry for this. But my name is Nicholas Bartow. I've been living in Jerome for 3 years. I had never visited Jerome when I first moved here. I just moved here. My family was opening up a business out here, and I decided to be part of it. I originally came here to only be here for 3 months, and then I was going to go back to Denver, where I'm from, and I absolutely fell in love with this place. It's an unbelievable town. It's filled with amazing people, and it has an unbelievably unique history that I'm very appreciative to be part of. I actually really appreciate what the current town council has done, and oh God, I'm kind of just part of, or running for part of this just because I'm really bad at this stuff.
You're doing fine, Nicholas.
Yep.
Keep going.
No. I'm just doing this mainly because I really care about this town, and I really want to try and move it forwards in a direction that I think is appropriate for the town of Jerome. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Nicholas.
All right.
Under the time limit. All right.
All right.
Sage.
Hi, I'm Sage Harvey. I was born and raised in this town in 1973. I was here until I was about 19, and then I moved down to the Verde Valley. I met my husband, raised our children, and they're gone now. And so I've been back in town for 4 years now, and this is where I want to be. And I see a lot in this town that has not been taken care of in the last 45 years, and my main reason for running for council is to make sure and see that our infrastructure gets taken care of. I think that if we don't have the blood that comes in and goes out of this town, then we have nothing, and none of us will get to continue enjoying what you just described. Thank you.
Thank you. Hunter?
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Hunter Bachrock. I'm finishing up my first term as a Jerome Town Council member, and I've lived in Arizona for 44 of my 59 years. My father got a job at ASU in 1961, and my first trip through Jerome was 1966 on a skiing trip to Flagstaff. I was 8 years old, and when we got into Jerome, my mother said, "Boys, look out the window. This is a real ghost town." And I remember the curtains and the blowing and the broken windows and the empty streets, and I was fascinated immediately and never gave that up. When Charlotte and I moved back to Arizona in 1983, we were in Flagstaff for about a month, and I said, "You need to get in the car because I got to show you this crazy little town hanging on a mountainside down south." So Charlotte and I fell in love with the place, and it took us 20 years to get here, and I like to say we got here as fast as we could. We tired of the long winters in Flagstaff, and I feel like I've learned an awful lot in this past 2 years on town council about the nuts and bolts of this town, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in my closing statement. But I welcome the opportunity to serve again, and appreciate all of your support as neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex.
Good evening, everyone. To those that don't know me already, I'm Christina Barber, better known as Alex. I was born in Jerome on a cold January morning in the Gulch in a home that Lee Hawkins built. He was Jerome's dentist. He also owned Jerome's first automobile, from what I can dig out of the history books. He also had a groundbreaking dental technique where he would drive a cactus needle into your cavity. I am passionate about a community that I am extremely invested in. Jerome is my home. It is a treasure. I will work hard to create sustainable growth and to protect a town that I love if you vote for me and have me sit on the council again. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the candidates are going to have 2 minutes each to respond to a question from the League of Women Voters, which was sent to them in advance of tonight's forum. And as they're speaking, this is an opportunity for you to write your questions for them. You have the cards. Pat will be collecting them. And we're going to do our best to pose as many questions as possible to each candidate that you have written down. So let's go to the question from the League of Women Voters. We recognize that you have lived in Jerome long enough to know that there are things you like and there are things you would want to change about living here. Obviously, some of your opinions have been presented in your campaign, but we would like to narrow the focus just a little bit. So the League's question is in 2 parts. Part 1 is, what are 3 specific things you like best about living in Jerome? And part 2 is, what are 3 specific things you would change or improve in Jerome? And we're going to start with Nicholas.
Okay.
3 things yes and 3 things change.
Okay, so the 3 things that I like most about this town, oh my God. Number 1 is the people in the town. I really, in like everywhere I've ever lived in my life so far, I've never made more friends than in this one specific town, all combined, which is insane. The people who live here absolutely make the town. I mean, without them, it's just a bunch of buildings. It's just a place. So I really, really love the people up here, and I absolutely think that's the most important thing about this city. The second thing for me is the super rich history and culture that this city represents for the state of Arizona. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. I mean, major cities in the U.S. have less history than this place, which is kind of impressive. And then the architecture / the historic nature of the town, I think, is impeccable. I mean, even some of the newer structures in the town, they've done a very good job of making sure that they are as accurate as possible to the specific neighborhoods, and I think that's really cool. There's like everything from Victorian houses to industrial houses to the early pioneer structures, and I think that's really amazing that the city's done such a good job of keeping that. And so those are the 3 things that I like. The 3 things that I would change, honestly, There's really only two for me. One is I think the town of Jerome needs to annex the land between Jerome and Clarkdale. It's mainly just because it is it's an issue of self-determination, and we can take control of the area and therefore be able to decide what happens to it, or also either, approve new development or decide to not have it at all, which I think is important to make sure that Jerome stays Jerome and is able to determine that as the time goes on, because right now a part of the town is not technically a part of the town. That's it for me. And then
Right on time, thank you. Sage?
That's really, the first part of that's really hard for me, because I read it the day that you sent it, and I had thought about it really hard until last night, and it's almost impossible for me to just pick 3 things that I really love about this town. The community, and it's not just a community. Unless you live here, you don't understand what this community is. We're a family, and to the point that even if some of us don't care for each other necessarily on a daily basis, if something happens in this town, we all get together and we help. You don't find a community that's that tight-knit anywhere, I don't think. And that is the core of it for me. But this is my hometown, and this is where my heart is. And like I said earlier, this is where I want to be. I love everything from being able to see the stars to listening to the flumes flow at night, you can't just pick one when you're that attached, I don't think. And for the things that I would change, my number one thing is infrastructure. And I think that we have a lot of buildings that are deteriorating that if we don't save them, we're going to lose the history of this town. And I think that's about 2 for me. I mean, there are other issues that can be dealt with, but we have some real big problems that need dealt with, and I think they need to be put at the top of the list. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Thank you.
The 3 things I like best about living in Jerome are its colorful history and remaining architecture, and that's number 1. As Sage touched on, the small community where almost everyone knows you and all that goes along with that, and you mentioned the family. I like to call it our dysfunctional family. But nonetheless, when you wave at 15 people going home, there's something really special about that, and you know your neighbors, and that's really something. I'll tell you what, the incredible views off my deck of the Verde Valley, Red Rocks, and the Mogollon Rim, we get to see Sedona and not be in it. And nothing personal, but in my opinion, that view is second only to the Grand Canyon in Arizona, and what a treat and a gift it is to have that. 3 things I would change if I could. I'm talking about magic tricks here. I'd like to reroute 89A so it didn't go through our town. People on their way to Prescott wouldn't contribute to the traffic issues. Foot traffic options would be enhanced, and the town would be a lot less hectic during daylight hours. It'd be like a walking community. I know that's a big one. Here's another magic wand. Poof, restore our roads, stairs, and sidewalks to make them safe, attractive, and functional. That is a huge challenge, but that's a big one. And my 3rd thing I'd like to change is I'd like to find a way to balance our town's residential housing such that younger people starting out and artists and such could afford to live here. And Jerome has always been a tough rental market, but it's worse than ever. And I'd like to think of some solution that could make a small change in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex?
Being born in Jerome, of course, I love my community, my friends, my neighbors, the wonderful people of Jerome. I'll say it again, I think we all have up here. We are the best example of the Old West in Arizona, historic. So that is something. And here to the views. Also the nature. I don't know if people have ventured around in the beautiful areas that you can walk around here. So also the nature aspect of Jerome. So the things I'd like to change is again, fix up things, roads, sewer, maybe think about adding in a couple more water tanks if we could, if that would help with the whole water shortage. So, thank you. You did.
It's okay. You're not my ex-wife, are you? I was going to say, holy cannoli.
Go, Jack, go.
Go, Jack, go. Okay. I think most people hit on a lot of these things, and the thing that drew me here the most are the people. I think all of us share that. It's the most welcoming community I've ever lived in. You know, it's the most independent individuals. You got people here who want to take care of themselves, and you got people here who think they can take care of themselves. And they may need a little attention. So that's where I bring my public health experience, and what I want to do is help. Health has not been something that's been talked about very often up here, but we have issues, and this is my world, and I know that I can help, and that's something I want to help with and help all of us. You know, if I can hold up a mirror so people can see who they are, what they want, and how they can be healthy, I will be very happy. I love the Humane Society. I've never lived in a community that cares so much for its animals and has been able to bring together a community of people that are caring. You know, Virginia, I've known Virginia for almost 20 years. You know, before I even moved here, I knew her in Phoenix. And so for me, I remember we did a Kids and Critters clinic there 5 years ago where I brought dental students up and we took care of kids and animals. It was really quite something. And so the Humane Society is very special to me. The people here are very special to me. My neighborhood is very special to me. I'm so thankful to live with Steve and Sherry across the street, Michael McDonald, Tracy, Lori. I mean, they sit down and jam, and I think I'm in Woodstock. You know, it's awesome. The people are extraordinary. And I don't want to change. I mean, I want to make things better if I can, but that's a collaborative. We all have to work together on that. If I could change things, that's one of them. The roads, the pipes, water. I mean, the infrastructure needs help. But I think we have the opportunity to do it because we have the mindedness to do it. People want to help each other in this town, and I love to be part of that. And those are the things, you know. Anyway, sorry, you got me thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. And please accept my apologies for
No.
being rude and forgetting about you. Okay, so now it's your turn. So if you have questions, if you'd hold them up and Pat will collect them, and then she's going to organize them. So why don't we take just like a 5-minute break while Pat organizes the questions, and then we'll resume with posing questions from you to the candidates. And this is important because you're going to be responding to their questions. If you would bring the microphones just a little bit closer to you, because we can't adjust the volume for recording purposes. So just bring the mics a little closer. Thank you. Okay, we're going to start the questioning, and Sage, we're going to start with you. And Mary, what are the 1 minute? You get 1 minute to respond to this. Okay, so what are your top 3 infrastructure priorities?
Water, sewer, and streets.
Thank you. Hunter?
That was too easy.
That one, yeah.
We're starting with the easy ones.
We've got some issues with our water delivery system that we're going to end up making big investments in, and so water, and we're also talking about a more equitable water billing system. That's not so much infrastructure, but yeah, we've got street problems and we've got sidewalk problems and
Infrastructure priorities, water and streets. Okay, Alex?
Water, streets, sidewalks, sewer. We could go on, but
Okay.
that's enough, I think.
Okay, good. Jack?
Same. I mean, the water, the streets, and the sewer. I think the pipes. It's an old town, and we just have to make sure that we're sustainable. And I think that's really critically important. I think we all recognize the similarity of those as priorities.
Nicholas?
I think the exact same order as Alex, with the difference being with the sidewalks, just some of our staircases are in such bad condition that it's kind of shocking that that's nothing bad has happened on them. And then that's it.
Okay, so this is the next segue on this particular issue of infrastructure. How will you raise the money to fix, sorry,
By stealing phones.
my apologies. How will you raise the money to fix the infrastructure, the streets, the sidewalks in the residential areas? Let's start with you, Hunter.
We do quite well actually with our tax revenue. It's certainly not going to happen all at one time because you can't just tear the entire town up. So it's going to be small segment after small segment over several years. So typically what happens is the Public Works defines the worst areas and we deal with those first.
Thank you. Alex?
Can I hear the question again?
Of course. How will you raise the money to fix our infrastructure, streets and sidewalks in the residential areas?
We are already talking about some paid parking maybe, and we also do get decent sales tax revenues. So that would be something the council would have to sit down and figure out.
Thank you. Jack?
Yeah, I think the paid park. I'd like to see the visitors take on some of the responsibility for getting money from them to help the residents deal with a lot of these infrastructure issues, the paid parking, the kiosk, so something in a way that does not negatively impact the residents of Jerome, but does engage the visitors. And based on what I've been hearing from Rusty and other folks too that have interacted with the visitors, they don't mind paying for parking, and I think we need to look at that. So clearly, those are the issues: the sidewalks, the streets, and the sewer and water. And I think we need to look at creative ways to generate the revenue to do that.
That's the question. What are the creative ways?
I think, well, one is paid parking for visitors in a way that is minimally invasive. We're talking about kiosk possibilities, maybe one or two. The town council, they're in discussions on this. And the good news is I'm really thrilled with the town council as it stands today that they're addressing these issues and really have come some reasonable recommendations. But that to me is it. I think we really have to look at how can we effectively raise money through our visitors without negatively impacting our residents.
Thank you. Nicholas?
Can I hear that question?
Sure.
Sure.
How will you raise money to fix our infrastructure, the streets and sidewalks in the residential areas?
So I believe that in terms of just infrastructure in general, I would have to check, is already part of the annual budget. But, if we need more money for that, certainly we could try and, in the annual budget, allocate more money into that. But that means, of course, it's coming from somewhere else. But, they're going to have to start with, obviously, probably the older parts of the city or the more frequented parts of the city and go from there. Honestly, some of the residential areas are significantly worse infrastructure than the tourist downtown. And a lot of that probably will need to be fixed first. But with that question specifically, I just think it should come from the annual budget.
Okay, thank you. Now this next question, I'm going to try and paraphrase it. Oh gosh, say.
Welcome to
I'm just in a hurry to get to all these
Speak up,
questions. Go, Sage. See, I'm
So
equal.
it's definitely not that you don't have hair, Jack.
No.
It's definitely not that you
I'm
don't
fair.
have hair. That's right. So,
Everybody's going to get a chance to be missed, I think. Okay, go, Sage, go.
so I've been going to council meetings for a while, and we do have annual budget that is involved in trying to fix some of this stuff, and we do have good sales tax, and I think that the citizens of Jerome might need to open their hearts to the possibility of putting parking kiosks up to create some income. I don't think that needs to be all of it. I think that we also need to look at more grants. We're a historic town. We should be able to find grants. We should have a grant writer finding us grants to help fix some of this. So that's, and then there's always the aspect of, we do own property, and there is such thing as financing. I know Jerome might be against it, but if our infrastructure fails, we're not gonna have anything anyways. So we might wanna really consider trying to use all of those things together. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now this question has a suppose in it. Here's the suppose. If the funds are not available, what would be the impact over the period of the bond in terms of maintenance, repair, and operations? I'm asking, who's starting? Alex, right?
I'm confused by the question. What bond are we talking about?
I don't know. I'm just, do you know, who
We
wrote this
have a-
question? You could clarify it for us?
We have a sewer bond that we put in our budget to pay that off, so that if something happens, we can get another one to fix it up to the next 20 years. So if we're talking about sewer bonds, that's what I know about that.
Do you want to respond, Jack?
That's all I know as far as the bond goes. I think the grant opportunity is one where the current council has done a great job in getting grants for the town, and I think there's more opportunity there through grants. Bonds, I don't know. I'd have to learn more about that myself.
Thank you. Nicholas?
I definitely agree with Sage. A grant writer would be a fantastic way to help with situations like that. But I don't know enough about the specific bond question. I would have to look into that to have a better answer.
Thank you.
And I'm aware of the sewer bond, just from being in budget meetings in the last few months, but I'm not I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, so sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if that's the bond we're talking about, it's a very small figure at this point, such that we were considering paying it off entirely. So that's the only bond that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a quick one. It can be a yes or no response. We'll start with you, Jack. Here's the question. Can we install a few more public trash cans in town? Thanks, from Bertha.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, we can. It's where we put them is the critical piece of that.
Everybody gets a stab at this
Yeah,
one.
I think that's a fantastic idea. There's a lot of public trash cans down on Main Street, but not in a lot of other parts of town. And it would be really great to see way less trash all over the place. I, at my bar, go outside and pick up trash that tourists just leave everywhere all the time because there are no trash cans anywhere on Clark Street, other than one right in front of the Historical Society. And that's, I think, their property.
Thank you.
I believe that could be a yes answer because I also see trash overflowing quite frequently on the weekends and trash on the ground. I end up picking up trash myself. So, yeah, we could probably use a few more.
A couple of town council meetings ago, we got some insight from our amazing public works director about the reality of garbage in Jerome, and it's pretty grim, actually. And I brought up the question, could we not get a contractor to do that? And the answer was absolutely not. They won't even consider coming up here. So, yes, and I'd like to also replace the wine barrels that are kind of trapezoidal at this point. But, it's a great idea 20 years ago, and I like them. But, it's better than looking at Roughnecks garbage cans. But, yes, of course, and strategically placing them, where you have trash litter problems is a good idea. And they do need some maintenance. Right now, our town crew at 3 people, and the director is driving the trash truck, and he's wearing every hat there is. So we're apparently they're working on hiring additional help, but they're stretched very thin, and so we're going to have to talk about garbage at another meeting. But that one's come up. It's a big issue.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes, we need some trash cans down in the lower parking lot as well.
Okay. Thank you, Bertha, for your question. Okay, now we're going to talk about vacation rentals. And we're going to start with Sage. Does the town profit? And if not, why not?
I believe that the town does profit from vacation rentals if they're above board. Not all vacation rentals or B&Bs in this town are above board, and we do not profit from them. And the citizens sometimes feel like they're being overwhelmed by the tourists in the residential neighborhoods. So, thank you.
So let me take a moment here and notice that the next question is also about vacation rentals, and it's a little bit broader, and it's asking you to share your opinions and views on vacation rentals and Airbnbs, which kind of incorporates this first question. So could we give 30 seconds to Sage to share your perspectives on vacation rentals and Airbnbs more than what you've already said?
I think that vacation rentals and Airbnbs have a place in this town, but I don't think that the tourists that get to enjoy them should be parking in the residential areas, period. I don't think that they should get a temporary permit. I don't think that they should take public parking. And I think that when it comes to the vacation rentals, that those people need to let their guests know that they are in a residential neighborhood. And a lot of us work up here and don't necessarily want the noise or to see our customers in the morning. So there's got to be a fine. I've like seriously walked out on my porch in my pajamas and seen tables that I wait on, you know, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable. Most people are pretty good about it, but I think that we need to find a happy medium. I don't think that they don't belong here. I think that people need to enjoy this town a little bit, like we get to enjoy it a lot, but I also think that we need to find a happy medium. Thank you.
To answer the first part of the question, certainly the people that stay in vacation rentals contribute to the tax revenue that we enjoy as a town. So in that aspect, yes. Now, you know, what the exact dollar figure is, I don't know. There's other consequences of that. I mentioned the rental market in this town, and it's been estimated that 25% of the homes in Jerome are a vacation rental or have part of it that is a vacation rental. So that has had a huge,
30%.
that's had a huge impact on the already tough rental market in our town. We, as a town, along with many other, every other town in the state, kind of got that issue shoved down our throats. And as we speak, it's unlawful to prohibit vacation rental use. I wish the people that owned them would have a little instruction sheet about courtesy to your neighbors and specific parking instructions. And this is something maybe we could encourage the owners of vacation rentals to do. However, it's only as good as the people that receive it. So it's been an issue, and it will continue to be one.
Alex?
I'm going to talk a little bit about what Hunter was talking about. From what I understand, 30% of our 126 residents in Jerome are vacation rentals. So Jerome has a zoning ordinance and a town code that talked about having bed and breakfasts in residential areas and keeping the vacation rentals to the commercial area. So then Arizona made SB 1350 that said they'll take away our tax revenue. I even heard on top of that that if we try to make them get a CUP, they're going to violate us further. So a small town like us, what would we do without our tax revenue from the state? So to kind of tie our hands, we are so unique here. If you look at Sedona, that is also fighting vacation rentals, they have 1,000 vacation rentals. I think they said about 25%, 20%. So in Sedona, you have somewhere, you have an alley, you have an easement. Jerome, sometimes our houses have zero clearance, zero easement. The porch is on 89A. So it does become a little bit different in Jerome. I don't know if those Congress people ever came out here, the people that wrote the laws, and saw what a nightmare it is to try to park on Verde, School, Center, 1st through 5th. So Jerome, it is what it is. The only way we can really fight it is safety, fire hazard. Vacation rentals are kind of like putting a motel right next to where someone lives. And in Jerome, with how small we are, as Sage mentioned, we want to keep our residential areas where we can be ourselves and keep our majority of 1.5 million people yearly. Think about that, you guys, 1.5 million people a year. That's like 4,000 people a day. And if you walk from your vacation rental up and have a libation, and then you walk back down and go down every single street and go, I don't know where my room is. Knock on Susie's door, knock on Rebecca's door, Sage's door. So I'll stop there. Thank you, the state of Arizona, with SB 1350.
It is, and I have to commend, again, the town council has been addressing it in the meetings that we visited, and go to see how difficult it is. The other issue, and I agree with what's been said, and the one thing I would add too that I have a concern about is with the more vacation rentals, you have the more people taking showers and flushing toilets. And we have a water issue as it is. And I think that's one thing we haven't really talked much about, and I think we need to look at as well. The parking, all these things, the safety, but the water usage, I think, and that's where I think the metering may come in as an opportunity to pay your fair share. And I think that I'm a big fairness guy, equality. And I think that if someone is using more, they should pay more. And that's just the nature, that's the way it should be in life. And so that's one of the areas that I think we need to look at that has not been really looked at as well.
So the thing with vacation rentals is I definitely think that, of course, the state of Arizona has said that we are not allowed to say no, essentially, at this point, which I really, really hope they look at in the future, or maybe in the federal at some point. We'll look at in the future and say that towns are allowed to decide whether or not they do and do not want them. There's definitely two sides to that. One is that these are people's personal properties, and if you go into someone's home and tell them what they can and cannot do, it's a super complicated issue. And so there's definitely that side to it. The other side is I rent, and I have a lot of friends in town who rent, and it is very slowly raising the price of everything up here because there's way less housing, and it is also pushing everyone out of town who is working here. And so I think it's really, really sad, and I hope one day Arizona will get rid of that law.
Okay, so everyone's had an opportunity to speak on vacation rentals. Okay. So this kind of ties into what you were saying, Nicholas, this question. How important are private property rights, and should they override the rights of neighbors or the history of our town? Hunter, I believe you're on first.
In all honesty, no is the answer, but the reality is we have to do what is legal. And to avoid spending every dime we have on lawsuits and spending all of our time in courts. As Nicholas alluded to, hopefully that can change with a future different administration. We're hoping. Until that point, we have to do the very best juggling act we can do, and that's the reality.
Alex?
Can I hear the question again?
How important are private property rights, and should they override the rights of neighbors or the history of our town?
I think we're talking Prop 207 that talks about property rights. So within legality, I kind of feel that Jerome, usually neighbors try to do the neighborly thing, but that's not always the case when someone new moves in and they decide they're going to do whatever they want. So then we have boards and things in place to make sure that we get a structure of kind of what we would like. So that's, I guess, all I have to say about it.
Well, the property rights, everybody should have the equal rights, same rights. And with those rights come respect. And I think we need to, and that's one of the beautiful things about this sense of community that we have here, is that we care about each other, we're respectful of each other. You're always going to find some, on the bell-shaped curve, someone over here that's going to be that investor that wants to buy the property or flip it or rent it. And you're always going to have those types of exceptions. But I think for the most part, my experience in the years that I've been living here and the years that I've been coming here is people just say, what's the right thing to do? And I think that's the standard that I would like to encourage us to continue to have. And it's not whose rights are more, who has more rights. We all have the rights. And I think we have to recognize that and respect that together. That's the way we'll succeed and continue to succeed.
Thank you. Nicholas?
Can I hear it stated again?
Yes, you may. How important are private property rights, and should they override the rights of neighbors or the history of our town?
Private property rights, I mean, it's certainly important for you to be able to decide what you want to do with your own home, but we're a historic city. You have to abide by that, absolutely. If you have a historic color in your house, you need to go, and you want to change it, you need to go before the boards that are set up for that, like Alex had said. If you want to do something that may affect your neighbors, you hopefully will do the right thing, or if it falls underneath the jurisdiction of the historic part of it, you will need to go before a board. And so that's my answer for that.
Thank you.
So the question, the way it reads is you're talking about two private properties, correct? Because it says your neighbor, so your neighbor is going to own private property. I think that both of you have private property. I think that you should have equal rights, respect, and then there is also the ordinances that we have in this town, and we are a historic town, and we need to keep our historic status for financial reasons. I believe that we get money from the government for keeping our historic status. I don't think that anybody's private property rights should encroach on anybody else's. I mean, it is a unique town. Sometimes we have to figure out ways to make things work, but I don't think that any of it should be above the history of this town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I heard Nicholas and Alex reference boards, certain boards. So this question has to do with that. It says, do you believe that the council can or should act as boards or commissions at their discretion and dissolve these boards? No. Oh, wait a minute. Whose turn is it? Alex?
No.
No. Okay.
If there is a problem and we need to take any of their stuff on our plate, we have fully functioning boards that have all the members in place now. So dissolving the boards, no. That is a definite no.
Thank you. Jack?
No, Alex is right. There was a very brief moment there where we didn't have people on the boards and actions had to occur. So I attended a couple of meetings and saw the town council step up. Nothing that they wanted to, but the board, there were no people volunteering. And to me, no, they should not. And that's one of the special things about this town is the volunteerism that we cannot lose. For all these boards and all the people that do different things in this community, that's a key component of what makes Jerome, Jerome.
Thank you. Nicholas?
In terms of dissolving if the town council should be allowed to dissolve boards, I do not agree with that. I think that if a board is going to be dissolved, it should be a vote put before the entire town. If, say they want to get rid of design and review or some other version of that. Into certain maybe emergency situations, say you don't have enough people on a specific board, the town council could act as a vote for that. But in general, absolutely not. It should not be allowed to be dissolved by the town council.
My answer is no also. I've been in a few meetings, and like Jack mentioned earlier, there was a point, there was not enough people on some of the boards, and council did step up. And I do not think that anybody on the current council wants to dissolve those boards because all that would do is create more work for them, and they're already busy enough. These boards are supposed to make things move quickly so that it can get to where it needs to get and be approved and not burden the council any further. Thank you.
Absolutely, and this issue came about recently due to the degradation and lack of participation in the boards. Our town put out notices requesting people to come, and I think the interest just kind of waned, and we were down to 2 people on one board, and our town code allows for, under extreme circumstances, the town council to take control of the issues that would come to these boards if they're not functional. So the town code's pretty clear about that. It's only under extreme conditions would the town take over these responsibilities. Town council has plenty to do without design review issues and without P&Z issues. And the boards that we have in place now are more than capable of handling these. It's been demonstrated already in a short amount of time. So I'd like to thank everybody who's participating in that. That did take a huge burden off the town council. At no point in time did the town council wish to dissolve boards and take them over. That was never our intent.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's you start first, right? Okay, so Jack, and for all of you, what is your opinion of the signage in Jerome?
I remember there was a grade I used to get in middle school a lot. It was an N for needs improvement. You know, and I think we need a little better signage. You know, we have a wonderful parking lot up here behind here, and we have a sign about the size of a clipboard, you know, on a post somewhere for people to find it. We live down the hill, you know, across, you know, Mary Sally in that area. There should be some fun sign there that says, "Don't worry, there's parking behind the firehouse. Keep going. Don't come up and turn around and go over the 4 stripes in front of Chad's place." You know what I mean? The people that make that turn to come back around, or to come in my driveway or Steve's driveway and turn around. No. We need a little bit of improvement in the signs.
Thank you for your
I'm
opinion.
just glad you asked, just because you asked.
Nicholas, what's your opinion?
So I have a question for whoever wrote it. Are we talking about directional signs with this, or are we talking about business signs in town, or the signs on people's homes? Because I've had 1,000 conversations with Kyle Dabney when he was here for that, with him about that, and there's a huge difference there. Like, for instance, if we're talking about directional signs, the directional signs in town are obviously bad. I manage my family's building, the UVX, and I commonly go up to our parking lot, which is completely open to tourists, and we literally have signs asking them to park in it, and it is almost all the time half empty, which is insane, because I'll, at the bar, listen to people say, like, I couldn't find parking anywhere. And there's open parking lots that they don't know about because the signs are pretty bad in town for that. If we're talking about business signs, it's extremely important for businesses to be allowed to have signs to let people know that they are there, especially on areas where you don't have huge shop windows and people aren't like window shopping essentially. And then on the sign, then there's also signs on people's homes. You know, people can kind of do whatever they want with their own property, but at the same time, once again, we're a historic city. And so if you have a sign in your home or on your fence or on your property that is not directional, it probably should, once again, you should go to the design review board for that.
Thank you. I think you've covered them all. Sage?
So first off, I think that we need to put up signs on both ends of town that tell people that their GPS does not work in Jerome. And I don't think I'm joking about that one. We live on 2nd and Verde, and if you make a mistake and go down School, which it says residential parking, but people still drive down it. Some of them are looking for parking. Some of them are following GPS, and it does not take you back down first to get out. It takes you down second. And we've actually had 20-foot RVs at 9:30 at night that could not make that turn. I think that our business signs are absolutely important. I think that in our ordinances that if they're not, they should be, what's the word I'm looking for? they should be historical, historical looking, so that we're not changing the feel of this town. I understand some of our signage needs to show where parking is and how to get to Prescott, and a lot of I work with the public every day, and I hear a lot of people ask me, how do I get to the state park? They have no idea, and I have to show them directions. Take this, do that, and if there was a little bit more signage, I think that people could find their way around town a little bit easier, both in the business and the driving, and maybe not use their GPS in Jerome. Thank you.
So recently, the town council approved some no drone zone signs. And I've learned a lot about that since then. So we've got two issues. You've got ADOT, because they have to approve every single sign that's placed on 89A. Now, I've noticed, because I pay attention, and I've noticed a few have snuck in there, and I'm wondering how they got there. Personally, I like the Ray Nagin for mayor sign. It cracks me up every time I drive by it. But the no drone signs, we ordered 2 huge ones, and we're applying for a permit to have them placed down as you're coming into town. But on our property, we can post signs. But I agree, it's, so you've got highway signs and you've got business signs. And our regulations are fairly strict. It's just there are actually a lot of signs in existence that do not have permits, and it's usually complaint driven. So, but it is a big issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue. But businesses need to have signs to make people aware of their businesses. We've had some issues in the past where they've been placed as part of, extenuating circumstances, and we're kind of stuck with them. And those, unfortunately, sometimes set precedent. But so we're I'm sure our P&Z department and DRB will be working diligently on revising it. And even our attorney has said that our DRB code needs updating desperately. Thank you.
Our zoning administrator had worked on a sign project for the businesses throughout town, which I guess from what everyone had talked about was something that the town wanted to do. So we've talked about signs. Me and my sister have talked about signs, me and a couple other people in town. When you pull up to the park, you're there, Spirit Room on one side, the Mine Museum on the other. It doesn't really matter how big our parking sign is there that says it's out here. They're not looking at the sign. There's so much other stuff to look at. So I feel like singing that signs everywhere sign song. I mean, we do need signs, but how can we get people to look at them? We can't. So it's a give and take. It is we're still trying to figure out how everyone can have good signage. Our boards, they talk about it regularly. People bring their signs up. I don't really think through the main of town there's problem with signs. It is places that are out of our main strip that want to have signs screaming, come up, walk up 100 stairs to come see our business. So signs is a delicate thing in Jerome. We have quite a few signs that say don't turn around. Everyone still turns around there. The signs did nothing, and there's 2 of them. So I agree with maybe put up a sign, but on the other hand, if they don't read it, what does it do? And then ADOT has put some signs up that are totally in the way when you're coming up Jerome, where someone in a trailer could actually pull over, and they put a sign right there in the middle of it. So ADOT sometimes makes it a little hard for us to get signs that we do want up. And I definitely agree that I've heard Rusty Blair tell people, if you're in Arizona, if you're in Jerome, and your GPS tells you to go down a dirt road, stay on the paved road. Your GPS does not work. Stay on the paved road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This next question has to do with what input should be considered in continuously improving and changing Jerome, or even if Jerome should be changed. And it says the following: do you believe that Jerome should change based on the wishes of businesses or property owners rather than the historic character of the town? Want me to read it one more time?
Who's answering?
Nicholas. We're starting with Nicholas.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, could you read that again?
Of course. Do you believe that Jerome should change based on the wishes of businesses or property owners rather than the historic character of the town.
So, as one of the people in town who has a business up here, the reason why we're up here is because Jerome is the way it is. I don't think really much of any of the other businesses in town want the town to change because they exist. You know, my business is up here because this town's amazing. It's a fantastic place, you know. In terms of property owners in the town, I'm sure there's certain things, I don't own a property in town, and so I'm sure that there are certain things that I don't understand about owning a property in the city that you would perhaps want changed to your street or your neighborhood or a code that's specifically, you know, attached to that. But I would definitely have to do more reading on that too, to make a view specifically on property owners for that.
Thank you. Sage?
That's a pretty open-ended question, change. I mean, it would really have to depend on the change, but as long as it stayed historic, I would be okay with it. Again, I have to reiterate, we are a historic town, and if we do not keep our historic status, we will not continue to get money to improve our town. I think we need to improve on some of the things that might have already been started or some of the ordinances and maybe fine-tune some things, but I don't think that we should change the history of this town at all. Thank you.
I'll give you an emphatic no to that question. I feel that the businesses that have come to this town, as Nicholas said, are here because Jerome is unique. You know, and I'm trying to envision what kind of extent, you know, plastic storefronts or sunglasses huts, you know, and that, you know, that just horrifies me. So I'll say no. The charm of this town, the reason people come here is because of the way the town is. And I'd like to thank those tough old hippies that have been here for 50 years that have worked hard to keep this town the way it is, and it's the reason it's so unique and wonderful. So I think businesses will come here, generally are going to be thrilled to be here and have an opportunity to make a historic looking building and along the lines of our design review.
Thank you. Alex?
No.
Would you like to elaborate?
I don't think I need to elaborate. I'll leave it at no.
No.
Okay, Jack?
No. You know, and I say no to the change, but I do say yes to innovation. And you don't have to have change sometimes if you want to innovate. Like I have this idea to do this free self-health center where people can come up to the town hall at some point, I hope in the future, and go in there and check their own blood pressure, check their own A1C, get some nutrition education information as a free service. That's not changing the town. That's innovating improvement. So I'm an absolute no for change, but an absolute yes that we need to explore what are innovative ways that we can help the people of Jerome help themselves to be healthier.
Thank you. Ready for the next one? Okay, and we're going to start with Sage, right? Okay. Please share your views on the recently passed residential parking ordinance.
I don't care for them. I live in a residential neighborhood, and at one point, right after it got passed, I was given a private parking space, and I was really grateful for it, but then I decided that I didn't want to park next to the people because some of them don't park so well. So I had to go get a second permit. I brought up several times in council that there are parking spaces that have been marked in the residential area that are not marked to what they are supposed to be according to our ordinance, let alone state ordinance. I don't think, again, I will reiterate, I do not think that the tourists should be allowed to park in our residential neighborhoods. It is already overtaxed with the people that need to park there. So I think that it could either be fine-tuned or maybe even repealed. Thank you.
This, of course, is another one of those hot-button, difficult issues that the town council was forced to face because we talked about one another. You have a small neighborhood where everybody knows each other. everybody knows where everybody parks, and when more and more people move into the neighborhood, that changes. And this is a town built when there weren't automobiles, and so this has been an issue and will continue to be an issue. The town council is working on the old town yard, which should provide something like 30-some parking spaces. So we're hoping and that'll be for residential use. That's our goal. But I absolutely agree that visitors should not park in residential zones that are marked that way. And the town council, well, actually, the police department identified the problem areas where they were getting a lot of complaints. So again, it's complaint driven, but unfortunately it became necessary in some parts of the town. And that's one of those things that we hated to face and had to. It was a tough decision and continues to be until that hopefully works itself out. So we're hoping the town yard will alleviate some of the congestion in those tough areas.
Thank you. Alex?
This was actually sponsored by Alan Muma. And I think that it's kind of nice because it kind of eliminated some boats and some extra things that were down streets that maybe they shouldn't have been. And if you move into a residential area and you have 5 cars and there's no parking spots, do you really bring all 5 of your cars? So I think maybe some Jerome residents exacerbated the situation. That whole area is a parking nightmare. Jerome was built before automobiles. There's quite a few vacation rentals in there. When you own a house, you want to be able to park next to it. So it is what it is. I think it probably needed to be done, but it does have some serious bugs to work out, so.
Thank you. Jack?
Well, I think it's not an easy one. It's a necessity right now, and I think we have to explore and see how it can be improved. But we all know parking is an issue in this wonderful community, and there's still opportunities that we have to explore to see how do we improve that situation.
Thank you.
So I think that it kind of had to happen eventually, especially with the amount of visitors that the city gets. If we don't want them to park in the residential areas, we need to know who the residents' cars are, and that's not just like memorizing the cars. That's having something like a sticker or something on it that says, oh, this person's belongs here. The cop immediately knows, or meter person or whatever it's going to be at some point, immediately knows that and knows that, all right, this car has been here for X number of hours, ticket. It's kind of needs to be done. That I assume would be the next step or one of the steps that the town council will eventually take with that specific parking issue. It's unfortunate that it's had to happen, but there's everything from the amount of visitors to once again, like people who have multitudes of vehicles. We kind of need to know who everybody's cars are and where you can park specifically in your neighborhood.
Thank you. We're going to start with you, Hunter, on this question. The town owns the old Jerome Hotel, which currently has 3 floors vacant and unused. What is your vision for the future of that space?
Thank you for bringing that question to us. I mentioned earlier about the exacerbated rental market, and my vision for that hotel, first of all, we got a roof on it to save it. It was on its way to crumbling. And the engineering involved in tearing that building down would have been unbelievable. It was much easier to save it. It's a treasure, and anybody who's been in it knows some of the history. The idea that I would like to see happen is you've got 3 floors, 3rd, 4th, and 4th floor, that are about 3,000 square feet each, which would make 4 or 5 nice middle or low income apartments. And so, again, we've got a parking issue, but that was a 54-room hotel. And if you had 54 rooms, the parking problem would be unbelievable. Well, and entirely out of the question. But so saving the building was the first idea. Making it safe with asbestos and lead continues to be a big challenge. but I hope that people can enjoy living in it someday, a small number of them, and maybe alleviate some of the rental problems.
Thank you. Alex?
Low-income apartments is something Jerome, medium to low-income apartments is something Jerome needs. With the vacation rentals and the prices of houses, our workforce is being forced out of Jerome. There is a super parking issue though. So fixing the building up, keeping it from falling down is a great thing. We also have, what would you call it? When our chief of police has to live here, our fire chief has to live here, we have some of our
Residency.
yeah, the residency that you have to live here to be crew chief. So, and with our fire chief, our police chief, when they retire, how are we gonna get someone else to come up here and be able to afford their house? We had a funny little thought of that, like Rusty would move and the new chief would move into his house, or Muma would move and the new chief would move into his house. But that's probably not gonna actually happen, so. To be able to have like our department heads, to have them somewhere to live, to be able to work in Jerome, that is something that we would have to figure out, because parking is definitely an issue. And there's what, 5 parking spots maybe for that place around the back, if that's even theirs and not property owned by the people next to it.
It's lot line. It's
0.
built right on the lot line.
So again, it was used before there was cars in Jerome. So I have high hopes for the building, but it's what we can do as far as our parking restraints go. So we also talked about maybe making it to where our department heads didn't have to live in Jerome because of the crunch of how are they going to be able to. So it's definitely a work in progress, and a lot of negotiations and things need to be done to figure out what we can do with it.
Thank you, Alex. Jack?
Yes. Thanks. You know, I would love to see that Hotel Jerome work on those floors. I think, as Rusty knows, we need to have fire escapes, we need to have an elevator, we need to have egress opportunities. I walked it today after we chatted, and I saw the parking on the one side of that parking lot, and I was envisioning maybe part of that parking lot, somehow we figure out a way to do it, to get some parking spots assigned to that. I think we could figure out a way to do it. I'm concerned about housing inexpensive rentals for young artists. I don't want them leaving Jerome. This town was built on its art. This town was built on, that's what makes it historic, a lot of it. I don't want to lose these young men and women that aren't able to live in Jerome because they can't afford to live here. I see that we could do that. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some grants. I know Hunter and the town council has really been diligent in trying to make something happen. We have to continue that. I think there's opportunity there to make it happen. I myself would love to see a little piece of it up there, once they get an elevator in and the fire escapes and everything in, a little assisted living facility. I think it would provide a need. We got a lot of folks my age and even a couple of months older, maybe 2 or 3 people. But I think we need to be able to, it'll provide opportunity for employment, for people to work there and to help people there, because it is a real service community as well. So yes, that building is a critical part of our future in Jerome. We have to all figure out ways how we can make that happen.
Thank you. Nicholas?
This is kind of a strange question to me. My family had looked at one point, leasing it for 99 years to restore it as a hotel, which I didn't super agree with. I think it would be best used as 1-bedroom or studio apartments for all the people who work up here, because at this point there's essentially 3 apartment buildings in the city, and if those stay apartment buildings, that'll be surprising. I know that the clubhouse is not going to stay an apartment building, and the Taylor Arms Apartments, hopefully that stays an apartment building, and I know for a fact that the Jerome AVX Center will stay an apartment building. But we really need more places for the people who live and work up here, and also definitely for the artists to live as they're kind of getting started out up here. I also just know from talking to my dad about that after he decided not to do it, how much money it would cost to redo that building is unbelievable. $3.5 million just for the structure. And then what they had talked about was selling that building plus that small parking lot where the land had fallen a little, and possibly putting a parking garage there, which is insane. And that alone is unbelievably expensive. I would love to see the town do something with it, but I think that it's just going to take an unbelievable amount of grants and money, because we don't have that in the budget to like do much with that for how much money it would cost to restore.
Thank you. Sage?
I think to this point, I think the council's done a really good job on restoring it so that it's not falling apart anymore. And I think it's a really great idea for long term to look at that, but I think that we have way more important things that we need to put our money into right now, like our infrastructure. If we can get a grant writer on and get someone to write a bunch of grants, I know the council got several already for it. I think it would be a really good idea to go forward with that, but I don't think that we should be putting any of our real budget into it. I think that our infrastructure needs to be the number one thing in this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I add a footnote?
Do the other candidates agree that Hunter can add a footnote?
We
Okay, go
we
for it.
have a grant in the works for lead-based paint removal of about $60,000. The roof was paid entirely by the generosity of the Artists Co-op and a grant that we still have a little bit of money left over. And we're also likely to receive a grant to start replacing windows on where the plywood is. And I think we're going to start with the street front, so that we can kind of bring that building back alive. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Alex, we're going to start with you on this question. And this has to do with growth. What do you see as the limitations of the water supply, sewer capacity, and topography as it applies to growth?
We're pretty maxed out with what we have going on. The future outlook of Jerome, I think 20 years ago, they said they thought there'd be about 800 people here by now, 7, 8, 9. So we're still right about 5. Our water system, I think the Jerome Water Corporation formed in 1902 or 1903. So if that gives you a little bit of like our need for water infrastructure, we did put $95,000 into the water this year, and a lot of stuff was done. Our sewer is probably at capacity when we're full. So as far as growth goes, a house a year is pretty much all we can kind of do at this point. It seems like maybe we get a house a year, maybe a house every couple years, maybe 2 a year. So we are very limited in growth. And it isn't just the space that we have to build houses in. It's the water, the sewer, the streets, the sidewalks. So
Thank you.
it is a balancing act.
Ditto. I certainly have no interest in pursuing growing the town. You're going to get an occasional, like Alex says, 1 or 2 homes, but I think we're maxed out now until we can really get a better handle on the infrastructure issues that need to be addressed, whether it be the water, the sewer, and the streets. So I think we're fine. I think 444 is a great number.
Thank you. Nicholas?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with Alex and Jack. I don't think the town really has much ability to grow, nor do I think it would really, unless some bizarre miracle happened and we somehow got more water, which I really don't see happening. We're in a desert state. I think the town's either at or very close to how big it's going to be for a very long time.
Thank you. Sage?
I'm pretty much with everybody else. I don't think that we can handle much growth. There's not room. Our infrastructure won't handle it right now, that's for sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jerome's very fortunate in that the topography does not lend itself to easily building homes. And that is probably a big factor in what has preserved this town. And, I think a lot of people will come up and take a look and then go, okay, we're looking at $400,000 for a foundation, and that's a little prohibitive. So we're very fortunate in that aspect. And as is pointed out, one house a year is been fairly typical. So I think we're in good shape for the immediate future.
Thank you. This question asks each of you if you have had an opportunity to tour or walk the entire town, and if you have, what are the issues that you see and what did you learn from your tour? And I believe we're starting with Jack.
Well, I think for me, one of the things you notice is pretty obvious, the sidewalks. And I think it's difficult to expect someone who is a hardworking individual who's not making a lot of money, that's in a home, and has sidewalks out on the street that need repair, to expect them to come up with the funds to do that. We try to do a scholarship program, I think. The town council put together a matching thing. It still makes it very prohibitive. So I think that's one of the things for me. The streets, obviously, you know, I've noticed how rough they are. Even for me, walking up to the Humane Society, up that road there, that's a pretty tricky road to walk up. I don't care how young and athletic you are. And I think so. Those are some of the fundamental things to me. The streets, you know, we want to keep the charm of the streets, but we need to fix them. We need to keep the charm of the sidewalks, but we need to. It's not safe. I mean, Jamie and I, we walk every day up that curve. I mean, you can see the black tire marks on the curb. That's a giveaway. You know what I mean? Oh, that doesn't look like footprints to me. You know, so I think those are the things that jump out and that we really need to look at. And I know the town, and I've been impressed with the town council up to now, that they're really looking at these issues and trying to figure out ways to solve it, and they're not easy. And I think I can't expect it to be a burden on the homeowner. I really can't.
Thank you. Nicholas?
I definitely agree with Jack. I mean, the sidewalks in town, the staircases, because essentially most of the sidewalks are staircases or just super steep, definitely need to be looked at and addressed there. But that's, you know, the infrastructure thing that pretty much everybody started with except for me because I ran out of time. But it's, you know, I've walked around town several times. I really try not to go into the neighborhoods unless I have some reason to be there, because that weirds me out when people do that to me. So, you know, definitely, I mean, like, the infrastructure is just, the roads are falling apart. You can see open sewer lines, like, literally right by our building on a staircase that's kind of like a private property / weird sidewalk thing. There's an open sewer. So it's really, that is absolutely something that needs to be done. Like, probably the #1 issue Jerome should be focusing on is our infrastructure.
Thank you. Hunter? I'm sorry, Sage?
Yeah, I almost got skipped too. I'm good.
I just see if you guys were awake.
I don't know. I didn't do it.
No. Go, Sage, go.
So yes, I have had an opportunity to run all over this town. And what I've noticed in the 4 years, and actually the first year I was back up here, is that a lot of these streets and a lot of these sidewalks and a lot of these stairs have not been repaired since I was in diapers, let alone our infrastructure of water, sewer. So this is a big part of why I'm running, because I would like to see Jerome taken care of a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you, Sage. Hunter?
You know, I have not had the opportunity to cover the entire town, but I've covered quite a bit of it. And what fascinates me are the unique little spots and the foundations, and it makes me think of the neighborhoods that once were there. And there is a car sticking out of the side of the hill that was once, I guess, part of a retaining wall. It's still there. And what I love to see on these forays is the glimpses of what this town used to be. I cannot imagine. I mean, I know the number of 13,000 people has been bandied about, but if it were 10, it would just be an astounding place to be. And again, you get a reminder of the history with all the foundations, and it's just nice to think about what the town once was. But as has been pointed out, you also see, see the flaws and the cracks. And I'd also like to point out that when we look into addressing some of these issues, it is daunting. and also with a construction boom in Cottonwood and Verde Valley, skilled, qualified contractors are getting harder and harder to find. Sadly, most of the contractors we're having that will come do a bid are from Phoenix, and but that's the reality. At this point, it's cyclical. So right now, nobody's looking for work, but there's a lot to do. It's just it's not something you can snap your fingers and make it happen. I've learned that. Thank you.
Alex?
We've talked about roads, we've talked about sidewalks. We also had a master drainage plan done by Shepherd Westminster and talked about all the things. The monsoons, they're killing my road. I was in a ditch today going up, so stormwater drainage. All of our catch basins are too small. We're having problems again with the lower parking lot, sandbags. So the flume was one of the major ones to the tune of what, $1 million? $1.5 million. So stormwater diversion, our catch basins, all of that needs some help, especially around this time of year or so, and our poor dirt roads.
Thank you. You've talked a lot about the community, the sense of neighborhoods, engagement, caring about Jerome. What are your thoughts about how to sustain volunteerism in Jerome? And I think we're going to start with you, Nicholas, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
How do we sustain volunteerism?
Sustaining volunteerism with like the older people in town, it works really well. Just most of you talk to each other all the time. I work all the time, but there's a lot of younger people up here, and they're not really doing a whole lot. And a lot of that is just, on one side, I'm sure it's just they just don't want to. They'll think it's their job, but it's 100% their responsibility to do this stuff. It's extremely important to continue the town going, and you need people under 50 to continue actually doing that. And so it's, in terms of for what I think would help a lot is doing a lot more on social media, getting, like at a town council meeting, like having a video camera, putting it live onto YouTube. There's a lot of ways to make it so that a younger generation actually knows about what's happening and cares.
Thank you.
Jerome has been a volunteer-based town for as long as I can remember. I think it's really important that the citizens of this town feel that they're welcome to volunteer for positions, as well as when they're volunteering, that people work together. Sometimes things can get ugly, and people need to remember that we're all trying to work together for this town and keep it what it is. And I think that when you step up to volunteer, that you should step up with an open heart and try not to be angry and mad at people. And especially when you step away, don't stop because you didn't get your way. Find a solution, work together. And I think that might help with that. I know that when they did call for volunteers for P&Z and DRB, lots of people showed up. And so if they are, aware that it's needed, people do step up in this town. And I believe that town council is already working on getting microphones and some kind of recording device and discussing getting it so that people can see the council meetings and what's going on in there, and people can possibly get more involved. And I think that that's good growth.
Thank you.
As a volunteer myself on town council, one has to understand that it's a huge commitment, and to get anything done, it's the same situation. So with an aging population, because young people can't find a place to live here, it gets more and more difficult. After all, when we get in our 60s, we're a little tireder than we once were, and so it would be nice to be able to attract young people who are a little more energetic and willing to kick in.
Thank you. Alex?
Sustaining volunteerism, I don't know, that's something that I was thinking about this whole time. How do you sustain volunteers? Respect each other, work together, thank people for what they do. Maybe when you don't see eye to eye, agree to disagree and work it out. So thank you, volunteers. Jerome it's amazing the numbers of volunteers Jerome has that actually makes us run, how many people we actually pay and how many people volunteer. volunteer on council, yay. So be nice to people. I don't know how you can sustain volunteers. It's not like we're offering to pay them. The town is loved so much that people just step up to be on these boards and have so much fun and agree to disagree with each other.
Thank you. Jack?
I think volunteerism is such an important component of the culture of Jerome. I think losing volunteers, part of it's that housing issue. People that love Jerome, want to be here, and would be accessible for that, are moving away. I think mentoring is a real important thing. I think for those of us in the room that have participated, some of us are over 70, some of us are over 40. I think we need to sort of say, how can we mentor some of these young other folks and get that shared vision? I think that's part of it too, is that helping people understand that what they volunteer for has value and makes a difference in people's lives. I think that's one of the things I learned with my students over the years, is to get their engagement by letting them know that what they do matters and the impact they have on individuals matters. And when young people get to see that and say, wow, I really made a difference in someone's life, I really did something to help them, then it just sort of manifests and continues to grow. And I think we need to, look at ways how we can educate ourselves about that and do more in that direction.
Okay, thank you. This will be the last question before we go to closing statements. So I want you to think that it is July 2023. Put yourself out there in July 2023. Okay? What is Jerome like? What is your vision for Jerome in 2023? Sage, I believe you're up.
In 2023, so this is 2018, that's 5 years? Mm-hmm. Oh. I would really, really like to see our water and sewer and our storm drainage and our streets and our sidewalks fixed. That is what I would like to see. I think this town will sustain itself with the tourism as long as we can keep what this town is without, I don't know how to say it, without growing too much, without compromising the comfort that we all get from living here. I think that we can find a way to sustain this town and still let it thrive. Thank you.
I see our town as pretty much exactly as it is, but better. Same but better. And as everybody's talked about, we've got buildings that are collapsing. We're trying to come up with solutions for that. After the Cuban Queen died, everybody looks around and go, okay, we need to save what we've got left. I mentioned in one of my things I love about Jerome, it's the remaining architecture. When I look at pictures of Jerome in the 20s and 30s, it's just heartbreaking to see the treasures that are gone. And so an improved town for both visitors and residents alike.
Thank you. Alex?
I see Jerome as a wonderful, vibrant community full of wonderful people. I don't see it changing that much, but I do think we need to become a little bit more sustainable, like maybe solar panels, water reclamation, using more water, rain gardens and things for outside, especially when we have a plethora like we have going on right now. So I don't see Jerome changing that much. Jerome needs to retain a balance between the quality of life that the residents want and the thriving businesses that some of the people, they're residents and they're business owners. So they have to kind of balance that of, I don't want the tourists in my backyard, but I do want them to come and spend money at my business. So it's a balancing act. It's all about working together is how I look at it. It's such a small community and everyone does know each other. Sage pointed out we don't always like each other, but when someone needs help, we all stand up. So it is so unique. I don't know anywhere else in the world that is as unique as Jerome is. So.
Thank you. Jack?
Well, I see in 5 years our population grows to 445. I see the I like to see us keep the same culture that we have here. I like, you know, and maybe, like I said, not change it, but make it a little better. The infrastructure, obviously, we've got to do that. If we're going to be sustainable, we need to address those issues with the water, sewage, and the streets. And for me, as the public health guy, I'd love to see the Jerome Center for Self-Health Management free to citizens, open in the town hall where citizens can go and learn about their health, learn how they can take charge of their own health and well-being, and be a part of making that happen. That's what I'd like to see in 5 years.
Thank you. Nicholas?
You know, in 5 years, I mean, I definitely hope that in 5 or in 50 years, Jerome's pretty much the same. I mean, other than seeing an improvement in like the sidewalks and things, if that could happen in 5 years, that would be amazing. I don't know if it'll happen that quickly, but hopefully. You know, honestly, I, for my business' sake or for everybody else's here's sake, hope it doesn't really change, you know. It's amazing because it is the way it is. The only thing that I think change-wise that it would be better with is with safer sidewalks and stairwells.
Thank you. Now it's time for closing statements from each of the candidates. You have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Alex.
I just want to thank all our departments, all our hardworking people that make this town run as well as it does. Thank you, volunteers. Sustainable volunteerism. Think about that. That is something to think about. So if you seat me on the dais again, I will do my best for a community that I am born and raised in and that I really do love. Thank you, Jerome.
Thank you. Hunter?
I've learned an awful lot about day-to-day challenges of running this town in the last 2 years and have gained a lot of experience. It's a steep learning curve as a lot is happening and more is in the pipeline every day. Town Council annual budget consideration meetings were a real eye-opener. We discussed the costs associated with keeping qualified employees at Town Hall and Public Works, the cost of a police force and a court system, keeping the water coming to town and keeping the sewer plant functioning to EPA standards, the challenges associated with keeping the garbage picked up, the logistics of getting contractors to come to town to bid and then to do the work. These are all things I never gave a second thought to as a citizen prior to my election. A citizen running for office needs to be prepared to perform a lot of volunteer work without the underlying agenda while maintaining objectivity, a sense of fair play, the ability to make tough decisions, and keeping one's cool while enduring a barrage of criticism. If reelected to the town council for second term, I do not promise to make every person in town happy. With my actions and decisions, compromise is often necessary. Without it, one party or another is being left out of the process. I will do my best. I do promise to do the best I can to preserve the historic character of this town and the quality of life for the citizens. But also to balance those needs with necessary actions one must inevitably take to maintain fairness, keep the bills paid, and comply with the law. For that's the reality and the responsibility of a town council member. Thank you, neighbors, for your support, past and future.
Thank you.
I'm running because I love this town and I want to see it continue to thrive. And if you elect me, I promise I will do everything that I can to help keep that happening without losing our history and without losing our community. I think it's important, but you know, it's why I'm running. So thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas?
You know, when I went to go get my packet, and then again when I was filling it out, when I turned it in, and the entire time since then, I have been having like a 100% heart attack. But and right now this is just like horrifying for me. But I really am doing this because I actually do care about this town. I really do care about the people up here. I really do care about where this place is going to be in 5, 50, or a century, long after I'm dead. I'd like to see it, you know, guided on the same path that's pretty much on, but by trying to preserve it and keep it the way it is. I think that's extremely important.
Jack?
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to get to know me and for me to get to know some of you a little more. I wear this shirt for a reason. I'm so grateful to be here in Jerome. Jamie and I, our neighbors, they know it. I say it every day, how thankful I am to be here. I spent 45 years doing community service. I've gotten pretty darn good at it. I've led organizations of hundreds of thousands of people. I've worked in communities half the size of Jerome. And I think for me, the opportunity to be on the town council and promote honest, compassionate, caring, and humorous interactions, I think, are critically important. Humor is part of my style. I may talk a lot. Sometimes I listen a lot. I do find that my leadership style is one of a humble leader. I tell my students that all the time. You got to be confident but not arrogant if you want to make a difference. Don't be afraid. I tell them, as far as integrity, the most difficult, well, I don't want to get into all my quotes and stuff like that, but, for a turtle to go forward, he's got to stick his neck out a little bit, so never be afraid to take a little bit of a risk. And for me, I want to bring the integrity that I've learned over the years, the successes I've had in working with organizations and helping communities. I want to do that in the community I love and the community I found to be the home for Jamie and I forever. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to participate.
I was slipped a little question while you were doing your closing statements, and it's a simple question. So may I have your permission to ask you this question, even though you've made your closing statements?
You can ask, we have to answer. See, that's part of the humor.
And we'll start with you, Jack. Do you want to serve a 4-year term?
Yes.
Nicholas?
Yes, I think it's difficult for people to get anything done, especially in government, in 2 years. I think that it's required for 4.
Sage?
That's a tough question. I don't think anybody wants to do something that long that's volunteer, unless you really, really, really love what you're doing. And I think that if you make progress in 4 years, if you make progress in 2 years and you feel like you want to keep continuing, then you should. I think that if I was elected for 4 years, I would definitely sit the whole time. I don't know. I got involved because of several things. The parking was one of the things. When I went up to get a petition to do something about the parking issue, I realized when I picked up a packet, because I was considering running, that I only had 2 weeks to turn it in. I'm not willing to wait 4 years to get involved in this town, so I better be willing to do 4 years if it gets voted in. So I am willing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Hunter?
Well, if I get reelected, that's exactly what I'll be doing, is a 4-year term. I think that the staggered terms are incredibly important because it eliminates a lot of the unknowns. You could clean house if you had enough candidates, and you'd have a brand new council starting with no experience doing it. So I support the measure to have staggered terms, yes.
Thank you. Alex?
Will you restate the question, please?
Oh, sure. Do you want to serve a 4-year term?
Do I want to serve a 4-year term? Jerome has 2-year terms. The staggered term seems something that is valid, because to have a full turnover and no one knows anything is definitely not a good thing to have happen. So do I want 4-year terms? No. Would I serve a 4-year term? Yes.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Verde Valley, I want to first thank the candidates for their participation and engagement in this forum. Secondly, we would like to thank you, the audience members, for your attention, participation, and awesome questions. A couple of reminders before we adjourn. Remember that primary election day is August 28th. The last day to register to vote in the primary election is July 30th. Early voting ballots will be mailed during the week of August 1st. Completed ballots can be returned by mail or dropped off at an election location in your area. If you are registered as an independent, non-designated voter, in other words, you haven't declared Republican or Democrat, you can vote in the primary. When you go to your polling center, you will be asked to designate which party ballot you want. If you are a permanent early voter, you should have received a form from Yavapai County Elections Office that allows you to select the party ballot you wish to vote. A ballot will not be mailed to unaffiliated voters until the Yavapai County Election Office receives a form from you, the voter, indicating your ballot choice. You may make your choice by contacting the Yavapai County Elections Office by phone, email, or through the early ballot request website for Yavapai County. There are these sheets on the back table that you can take one, and it has all the information you're going to need about voting. I want to indicate that candidates are available to speak with you after the forum adjourns in just a moment. And candidate information and voter registration materials are available for you tonight on the back table. And finally, remember to vote August 28th in the primary election and November 6th in the general election, because voting is people power. We are adjourned.